Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest Tempo Strategy Wild Meta Snapshot breakdown for Forged in the Barrens. Our first snapshot for the new expansion covered a tentative meta defined by two new standout decks, Aggro Tax Paladin and Flamewaker Mage, but that meta didn't last very long. Blizzard swooped in quickly with nerfs to address issues in Standard, and those changes even had an effect in Wild, where the nerfs to Far Watch Post and Sword of the Fallen in particular were enough to drive Tax Paladin out of the meta almost completely. But while Tax Paladin's gone, Paladin itself is still thriving, with hand buff Paladin assuming Tax Paladin's vacated throne. But wait, what about Mage? As it turns out, the standard nerfs for Mage had absolutely no impact on Wild Flamewaker Mage, so it looks like one of the most degenerate combo decks in recent memory is going to be around for the long haul. With hand buff Paladin and Flamewaker Mage on top, the rest of the Wild meta is scrambling to adjust. Come join our Wild meta experts as we break down the format's latest developments. As always, we're starting at the top of the tier list and working our way down, and for this snapshot, the top of the tier list is hand buff Paladin? That's right. After months of refinement in the Dark Moon era and the addition of powerful new cards from Forged in the Barrens, hand buff Paladin has emerged as the new deck to beat. Buffs from cards like Grime Street Outfitter and Smuggler's Run might not seem like much, but they add up quickly, especially when used to buff powerful charge minions like Argent Horse Rider and rush minions like Crab Rider. Factor in the deck's solid draw power with cards like Knight of Anointment and fast burn damage from Conviction, and you have Wild's latest aggressive powerhouse. Hand buff Paladin can easily overpower most other aggro decks, but it also has the card draw and staying power to stand up to Wild's most oppressive control decks. Put it all together, and hand buff Paladin has snuck up on the meta to become one of the best decks in Wild. Hand buff Paladin is huge, but it's not the only new deck that's tearing up the scene. Flamewaker Mage was an early frontrunner in the pre-nerf meta, but since the Mage nerfs for Standard did nothing to affect Mage's power in Wild, this powerful combo deck isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Flamewaker Mage stacks up mana discounts from cards like Incanter's Flow and Sorcerer's Apprentice, and draws extra cards with Refreshing Springwater and Stargazer Luna, all to build up a critical mass of spells and defeat the opponent in one turn with limitless damage from Flamewaker. This strategy can be difficult for most decks to interact with, but we're already seeing the meta adjust to fight it via cards like Dirty Rat, Cult Neophyte, and Lotheb, along with disruptive secrets like Explosive Runes and Snipe. Even with these countermeasures, a skilled pilot with a good draw can overcome any obstacle with Flamewaker Mage, which makes this deck a common sight at top Legend. Are there any decks from the Dark Moon era that can stand up to these newcomers? It just so happens that a couple of the best decks from the last expansion can still hold their own. Darklair Warlock is still a force to be reckoned with, even after the nerf to Penflinger that stops it from being used to discount Flesh Giant and Molten Giant. Post-nerf Darklair Warlock cuts Penflinger altogether and now includes Cult Neophyte to slow down mages, and Tamsin Rome to add extra damage potential when used with Power Overwhelming. Even with these changes, the biggest boon to Darklair in the post-nerf meta is the disappearance of Aggro Tax Paladin, which was one of Darklair's worst matchups. Hand buff Paladin has replaced it, and since Darklair Warlock has a solid matchup against hand buff, this deck is sure to stick around in the top tiers. Rounding out our tier 1, we have Reno Priest, which is weathering the turbulent storm of the post-nerf meta better than you might expect. Reno Priest hasn't changed much with Forged in the Barrens, but it still has great options against the best decks of the meta, with the Cabal Highlander suite, Priest-heavy anti-aggro removal tools, and excellent combo disruption with Dirty Rat and Mindrender Lucia. What's more, with hand buff Paladin and Flamewaker Mage running rampant, anti-Reno tech choices like Bad Luck Albatross are becoming more and more rare, and this means the Raza Anduin combo is more likely than ever to go unchecked. It might sound like old news at this point, but Reno Priest is still a rock-solid deck for climbing the ladder, and we don't see that changing anytime soon. Moving on to tier 2, you might think that the loss of Tax Paladin would have lower tier decks breathing easier, but that hasn't turned out to be the case. Hand buff Paladin and Flamewaker Mage are both powerful decks, and they're also polar opposites that attack the meta in completely different ways, so if a given deck is strong against one of them, it's likely to be very weak against the other. Case in point, Pirate Warrior is a solid choice against Mage with its particular brand of fast board development and relentless face damage, but against Paladin, Pirate Warrior struggles to gain traction against against their buffed rush minions and life gain from Chillblade Champion. Factor in Pirate's weak matchups against controlling priests and warlocks, and this deck doesn't quite make it to tier 1. Still, Pirate Warrior remains one of the fastest and most reliable aggro decks in the game, and boasts a matchup spread against most other decks that more than earns it a spot at the top of our tier 2. Secret Mage is also holding strong in tier 2, and with Tax Paladin dropping out of the meta, Secret Mage regains its title as the most disruptive aggro deck in the game. While Secret Mage's popularity has dropped in recent weeks, we're starting to see it bounce back thanks to its strength against Flamewaker Mage. Explosive runes and counterspell are both challenging secrets for the combo deck to play around, and with Secret Mage's solid board presence and over-the-top burn, it can usually finish off Flamewaker Mage before the deck can find solid footing. That being said, Secret Mage does struggle against the sheer size and efficiency of hand buff Paladin's minions, which is enough to keep Secret Mage out of tier 1 for now. Odd Paladin is also reporting for duty in tier 2, and while it's currently being dwarfed in popularity by its hand buff cousin, it still holds a spot as one of the most consistently viable decks in the game, thanks to the upgraded hero power from Baku the Moon Eater. Just like with hand buff, Odd Paladin saw serious upgrades with the additions of Conviction rank 1 and Knight of Anointment from Forged in the Barrens, which gives it faster damage output than ever before. Add in some light disruption from Oh My Yogg and Lothab, and Odd Paladin has a way to find at least a small edge in almost any matchup, even if it's not often a heavy favorite. Just try to stay away from warlocks and priests. And speaking of priests, let's talk about one of the most consistent counter decks that's available against hand buff Paladin, Big Priest. Big Priest still has an uncanny knack for shutting down aggro decks with its colossal taunt minions and endless removal, and while hand buff Paladin does have a few tools that can help it push past the wall of taunts in the short term, it will often run out of resources before it can land the killing blow. That matchup alone may keep Big Priest relevant, but its poor matchup against Flamewaker Mage in particular, and combo decks in general, will always keep Big Priest away from breaking out of tier 2. Altogether, we've seen substantial shifts in the wild meta after the release of Forged in the Barrens and the first round of balance changes that followed. Aggro Tax Paladin is gone, but hand buff Paladin has emerged to take its place. Flamewaker Mage remains undeterred from the nerfs, while former top contenders Darkglare Warlock and Reno Priest continue to hold their own. We're eager to see how the meta adjusts to the two-sided threat of hand buff Paladin and Flamewaker Mage, and whether any new or returning decks will emerge that can tackle both sides of the coin. In the meantime, be sure to check out the full report on our website for all of the details. As always, thanks for watching!